Okay, I think we're live. Okay, here we are. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Let me move up a little bit. Yeah, how's that? You can see me good now. Well, first of all, I want to thank our sponsors for Chopper History. Sponsored by Indian Motorcycles, sponsored by Law Tigers, and Badlands NAMS. Okay, if you've got any legal issues with a traffic accident with a motorcycle, contact Law Tigers. You want to try out a cool new bike to ride, try out Indians. Jody just loves her Indian, and who knows, I might be on an Indian before too long. You never know. And any electrical components, Badlands, NAMS, they've got it all the new LED stuff, all the components that go along with it. NAMS, Badlands, Electric Light, they have it all. So we want to talk about our paint show to start. Our paint show is March 10th at the Broken Spoke. It's right in the middle of Daytona Bike Week. And we're looking forward to a great show. It's sponsored by Russ Brown and SATA. And we've got a lot of other sponsors, Hard Drive, American Icon, NAMS, CSI, Hot Leathers. If anybody needs any Perowitz apparel, go to Hot Leathers website, and they've got latest stuff, sweatshirts, hooded sweatshirts, T-shirts, and they've got a bunch of new stuff. The flannels, I've got one of the Perowitz flannels on now. You can't really see it too well, but they're making great flannels, and so any of that stuff, just go on. If you're local, you can come here. If you're not local, you go to Hot Leathers, and they'll fix you right up. The paint show we're expecting a really good turnout. We've had lots of response. People are cooped up. They're dying to get out. Guys that have built new bikes, they want to get them out. They want to show them. Our Perowitz Paint Show at the Broken Spoke is a perfect opportunity. All the hot guys will be there with their new bikes. You know, all the big name builders, and then the trophies. The trophies are going to be really over the top this year. Nub, who we had on the show here recently, Nub is doing a trophy for us, and Flea, who we also had on the show recently, Flea is doing a trophy. I think it's the SATA, maybe the SATA pick. I'm not sure which one's Flea's doing. And then Darren McGeeg, who also we had on the show. Darren's doing a trophy, and you know, Darren's stuff is so much different than everybody else's, but he does an awesome job. Darren is a hell of an artist, along with the other guys. Actually, Nub drew up the logo for our paint show. And then Curly. Curly's always been involved in our paint show. Curly's building some really cool big wheel bagger stuff. And he just recently got a water jet machine, or some kind of a machine similar to that. So he's making a People's Choice trophy he sent me pictures of it. It's really cool. And then, of course, I'll do the Best in Show trophy. So, you know, anybody that wins, plus all of our sponsors have donated products to give away. Brock also. Brock's in there. We forgot to mention Brock. And so we'll have plenty of stuff. It'll be a really good show. Come and show your bike. And it'll be good. And then the next day, which is Thursday of Bike Week, is Willie's Tropical Tattoo. Willie's show is probably the best old school show that there is, as far as I'm concerned. It's not only the bikes, but it's the people. Willie has a really cool clientele of old school guys that have been friends of mine forever. So it's like old school, old home week at Willie's show. It's really a cool deal. So between the Perowitz Paint Show and Willie's show, that'll be the coolest bikes in Daytona, without a doubt. Well, today's topic, I wanted to I wanted to talk about the magazine industry. As most of you know, the magazine industry is pretty much gone. The only magazine left out there, really, in this country anyway, is Cycle Source, and Chris and Heather do an awesome job, um, and they work their ass off. And it's a great magazine. Well, back when I first started, back in the early '70s, there was lots of magazines. I mean, if magazines came out on a Friday, we were at the newsstands that day to get all the latest magazines so we could see what was going on and what was the cool stuff. My first magazine spread was in 1973, and it was in Custom Bike magazine. And the editor of that magazine back then was a guy named Larry Kumpferman. And Larry was very responsible for putting Allen Ness on the map. Not that Allen didn't deserve it. Allen was the guy, or one of the guys back then. Well, I would see all of Allen's stuff in the magazines, and then I'd see other guys' stuff in the magazines. And so me and some of my friends who, we all had cool bikes, customs. So we said, geez, our bikes should be good enough to get in a magazine. So I took the phone number out of the front of the book and I called it. And Larry Kumpferman answered the phone. He was the editor. And I said, hi, my name's Dave Perowitz. I'm from the East Coast, Boston, Mass, and Brockton, Mass. And I'd like to have my bike in a magazine. And Larry said, well, what makes you think that your bike deserves to be in a magazine? And I said, well, this is what we do. And I described the bike, and I described several of my friends' bikes. And I talked to him for a while. And at the end of the conversation, he says, well, then it sounds like I should make a trip. Now, he is from Westminster, California. I remember that. He said, well, I think I should maybe make a trip out to the East Coast and maybe shoot some East Coast bikes. I'm like, that would be great. He said, okay. And he, looked at his calendar and said, how about if I come out in 2 weeks? I'm like, sure, no problem. Let me know. I said, I'll pick you up at the airport. So now I'm just a young kid at the time. So I go to the airport. I have no idea who Larry Kumpferman is, right? Well, I go to the airport, and here comes this older guy who doesn't look like a biker at all. And, he's a big guy, and Larry only had one leg at the time. He had lost his leg in a motorcycle accident years before. So he comes hobbling off the plane. He's carrying a bag, and he sees me, and he says, Dave Perowitz? And I says, yeah. He says, oh, well, I'm Larry Kumpferman. So Larry came in, and, he got a hotel, and he shot my first magazine spread, which was a 65 Sportster. It was a rigid frame, had a Honda 750 front end on it with dual discs. And, it was a really cool bike for the time. And then he shot my brother Donnie, who worked for me at the time. He had a cool Sportster. He shot Donnie's bike. And then John Hartnett, who was one of my mentors back in the day. John was a cool guy. He was a custom painter, and him and I became really good friends. And I helped him build his first bike. He hadn't had a bike up to that point. So, and then one other guy, Charlie Antonio. So he shot the 4 bikes. John's bike came out first, and I still have the pictures, which I should have dug them out. But there was a picture of him and I and 2 other guys standing on Nantasket Beach with the bike and my dog, my old dog at the time. And, that was cool. So then my bike came out, the other ones came out. So that was like the beginning. That kind of I guess you could say, put me on the map. That was in the magazine came out, I think, in 1974. Well, in 75, I built some more bikes. Well, in 75, I went to uh, the show, a show in Detroit. It was called the Detroit Show. And it was the biggest show in the country at the time. It was just like the first year, but it was huge. I took my bike and John Hartnett's bike. We put them both in my old van. Drove through an unbelievable blizzard on the way out there. We got there, and Larry Kumpferman was there. Well, Larry introduced me to Alan Ness. This was in 1975. Alan was there. He was one of the judges. And actually, Donnie Smith was there. I met Donnie Smith there. Ed Kerr was there. Ron Finch, Tony Carlini, all these guys I met there at that show in 1975. At that point, Alan and I actually became friends. I invited him to Laconia. He came out to Laconia, and we spent Laconia weekend together, and then we put his bike and my bike in my old van. We drove to Detroit. We hung out in Detroit for a week with Ron Finch and Yosemite Sam brothers and Tony Carlini. But then the next step was Sandy Roca, which is AKA Jake. Sandy, he was a local. Sandy started in Easy Rider in California. He lived in LA and started working for Easy Rider as a photographer. Back in probably around 75, he moved back home to the East Coast, which he lived about maybe an hour from me. And Sandy called me and said, geez, we should get together. I'd like to maybe shoot something, whatever you have. So at the time, I had just finished building a Ness-style ironhead digger. Sandy came down and shot it. That was my first feature in Easy Rider, which is 1976. After that, Sandy and I became good friends. He shot lots of bikes for me over the next 10 years or so. He would come down. Sandy never used the studio. We shot everything outside. And, he was a huge help. About the same time, 76, in Daytona, I met Bob Clark. Bob was the editor of Hot Bike. Well, it was actually Street Shop at the time. Bob and I became good friends, and Bob is one of my best friends to this day. Bob was a real shaker and mover as far as the magazine industry. Bob worked for Tom McMullen. Okay, if you've been in the industry a long time, everybody knows who Tom McMullen was. AEE Choppers, he started, and then went on to, his own publication. So Bob started shooting whenever we went to an event as Daytona Sturgis. Bob would shoot most of the bikes that we had. And then, it got to the point where we became such good friends. Bob would fly out here. He'd spend a week with me, and he would shoot all of our stuff. He would shoot the events with us. He would go to the events with us. So, we got a lot of magazine coverage. At the time, Bob was shooting a lot of Ron Sims' stuff. Now, Ron Sims and Alan were both from the same general area, and Larry was shooting most all of Alan's stuff, and Ron and Bob Clark was shooting most of Ron Sims' stuff. And Bob was he was a huge factor in the magazine industry as far as putting guys on the map. You know, he helped me out immensely. He helped Ron Sims out immensely, along with lots of other guys, but in particular. Um, Bob went on to, do Hot Bike magazine. It changed from Street Chopper to Hot Bike. Bob was the editor of Hot Bike Street Chopper for 22 years. So he was very entangled in the whole magazine world. At one time, Bob was doing himself personally, he was doing 6 or 8 different magazines all at one time, working for McMullen, TRM Publications. You know, he was doing a bike magazine, he was doing a VW Trends, he was doing Shooter's Survival Guide, he was doing a surfing magazine, he was doing all these different magazines. And, you know, back then, if you were an up and coming builder, the magazines was like a tool. You know, once you got in the magazines and you got into that whole circle of magazine people, and you know, it just propelled your, you know, your life into the motorcycle industry. You know, today it's not like that. Of course, the internet is here, so you know everybody now posts everything on the internet. But you know that isn't. I just don't think that's like it was back in the day when magazines. Everybody looks at magazines. You know, not everybody looks at the internet. You know, most people do, but it's just not the same. You know, um, back then you were pretty special to be in a magazine. Now anybody in the world can be on the internet. All you have to do is post the pictures. Uh, the next guy that I wanted to talk to was Keith Ball. Keith and I met about the same era back in the late 70s. Keith was the editor of Easy Rider magazine for easily 20 plus years. Keith and I became really good friends. And, you know, Keith went on to feature many of my bikes in Easy Rider. I have lots of covers. You know, it was just a whole different world back then as far as the magazine stuff. It really worked out great. You made more friends. You know, all these magazine guys, most of them became really close friends of mine. You know, we traveled together. They came out here and stayed with me when there was an East Coast deal going on. You know, they would come out here. Also, Hamsters. A lot of them were involved with the Hamsters. So it was a really cool deal. Another magazine that Yale just brought up was Supercycle. Supercycle was owned by a guy named Steve Iorio. Steve Iorio was truly a character. Um, he owned a motorcycle shop in Chicago, and he didn't get along great with a lot of people there, and ended up closing up his doors and moving to L.A. He started Nostalgia Cycles in LA at about the same time he started Supercycle. Supercycle turned out to be a pretty good magazine. It lasted quite a few years, and they had the editor was a guy named Elliot Bourne, kind of an odd guy, but I got along great with him. He featured a lot of my bikes. And you know, Supercycle, you know, I still have quite a few covers that were on Supercycle, and you know, so there was a lot of different magazines. You know, C. Oreo developed the Super V engine, which was pretty much a scam. He did produce a few of them, very few. They never really worked worth a shit. But you know, you could buy a Super V motor, which was a V twin. Basically, it was a small block Chevy that was just cut off with just 2 cylinders. And if you wanted to buy one, you could call this number and you could listen to a recording of the thing run, and you'd send them a deposit and you could be on the list to get one. Well, there was a lot of disgruntled people that never got a motor. Like I say, he didn't make very many of them. And, you know, eventually people just gave up trying. Um, but another deal that Iorio had was um, Alan Ness went to Chicago one time for a show, and he hooked up with Iorio. You know, he met Steve Iorio. Well, Alan had somehow Alan found out about a junkyard in Chicago that had a whole bunch of motorcycle engines. You know, I forget exactly what they were. They kind of looked like a Triumph two-cylinder style motor, but they were a Japanese motor, maybe like a 650 Yamaha or something like that. You know, but Alan mentioned it to Iorio, and Iorio says, "Well, geez, let's go check it out." So they go to this junkyard, and there is literally hundreds of these motors in a pile in the junkyard. Well, Iorio goes in and buys all of them at pennies on the dollar. I mean, you know, I don't remember how much, but not much at all. Well, Iorio goes on to start selling chopper kits. Okay, you could buy a whole chopper kit from Iorio, which consisted of one of these motors and a frame, front end, and wheels. And he made a fortune off them. You know, if he bought them for $10, he was selling them for 200, and he sold a lot of them, a real lot. And you know, Iorio, like I say, he was a character. Um, you know, I don't know what more. I don't even know what ever happened to him. When it ended, it ended, and you know, I never heard anything about what happened when Super Cycle stopped and Nostalgia Cycle ended, and you know, that was kind of the end of it. But and then you know, to go on further, you know, there was several other magazines that let me see. There was Custom Cycle was an early one. Custom Bike was another one. Um, Iron Horse, which was a Paisano publication, which was Easy Rider, and Steve Stillwell. Steve is an old friend of mine. Steve Stillwell also started out with Bob Clark working for McMullen. And then I think he went on to be the editor of Iron Horse for Paisano. And you know, there was so many magazines back then. You know, then there was Outlaw Biker, which was oh geez, I can't think of what the guy's name was. Geez, I can't think of what his name was now. That was another magazine. Um, there was so many of them, and you know, to be in a magazine was a big deal. You know, it was a very big deal. You know, you'd go to an event, people would say, "Hey, I saw you in a magazine." You know, it's not like, "Hey, I saw you on the internet last week." You know, um, and you know, it's sad because it helped so many people get a start in this industry, which you know we no longer have. You know, Chris and Heather are the only ones left really in our industry locally. Now, Dave Nichols, okay, who went on to be the editor of Easy Rider, and Dave was the editor for a long time, probably another 20 years or close to it anyway. And now Dave is also involved in a new magazine called Choppers, and they're just coming out with it. I think it's maybe quarterly, and I'm looking forward to that magazine. And then you know, there's another new one, Dice magazine. You know, there's a few that kind of underground magazines. You know, that I don't think they're on the newsstands or anything. And the Horse Backstreet Choppers magazine. You know, that was a good magazine for a while. But you know, like I say, they're all gone. The internet really was responsible for killing the magazine industry, because the advertisers that keep the magazines going decided that they could advertise for free on the internet versus, $1,000 a month in a magazine. And so it got to the point where, the advertisers weren't paying the bills, and because they didn't have to advertise with them anymore. And, another magazine, Dennis Stemp had a magazine, Iron Trader News. Marilyn, I think, still does that on the internet. Dennis, I can't remember what the name of Dennis's magazine. Anybody out there, tell me the name of Dennis Stemp's magazine. Ironworks. Ironworks magazine. Yeah, it was Dennis. And then when Dennis passed away, Marilyn picked it up, and that was a really good magazine for a long time. I had a lot of bikes in that magazine. So, they have all these magazines, a dozen different magazine titles that helped people immensely, become, popular, out in the industry. And so it's, Kyle Casper just told me Choppers Magazine is $60 a year for a subscription. It's a little pricey, but hey, that's the price you got to pay nowadays. It's a pretty cool magazine, and magazines they're great for builders. I couldn't wait to get every magazine out there. I mean, literally, I'd hate to even think of how many magazines I have right now. From the old days. I mean, I probably have every Easy Rider, every Street Chopper, every Hot Bike, and plus a dozen other titles from the early 70s until probably, the late 90s. I have hundreds and hundreds of just boxes and boxes and boxes. And I had so many features. I've had, over 150 covers, just covers. I started collecting them, but I don't have room anymore to put them all up. Hey, it was a time in the motorcycle industry that we'll never see again, unfortunately. It was a really cool time. It was a really cool deal. For people to see their picture in a national magazine meant a lot, meant a real lot. And it's sorry to say that it's not here anymore. This here was one of my covers that Bob did, and I was a little younger then, had a little more hair, not as many tattoos. The belly wasn't as big, but it was a great time. It was a great era, and so let me see. I don't see any. I don't see any questions on the side. Okay, what was my most memorable build? Well, I guess the most memorable build was probably the two bikes that I built for the Discovery shows. Because we had to build them in a really unrealistic time frame. And at the time, I was very fortunate to have a really good crew of very talented guys. And I could afford the time, the hundreds of hours that it took to build those bikes. Discovery Channel never paid us a dime. What they paid us, when people ask me that all the time, what did they pay you to build a bike and be, on the Discovery Channel? I'll tell you what they paid us. They paid us 2 nights hotel fee when we were on the road, or 3 nights doing the build off. That was it. But it was well worth it. You could really make it worthwhile. And and it's it was worthwhile. They were great. They were a great time, and it's pretty rewarding to spend 2 weeks building a bike from the ground up, and something that's all handmade, and then have to ride it 1,000 miles without a hitch. There's a lot of self-satisfaction in doing that, and I can honestly say I did it. I rode every mile of each build off. We had one major breakdown that we miraculously fixed it overnight, and we moved on. So it's just it was a time in the industry that a lot of us out there will remember and look back on. And unfortunately, all the young guys will never really know what that whole thing, that whole era was like. And what's my favorite cover? Well, it's hard to say what my favorite cover. That one that just showed up with me on that digger, and it said "Sex in Perowitz." I don't know where that came from. Bob Clark made that up. But that bike that I'm on, I still have that bike. It's in my showroom right now. It's got a different paint job. It's yellow instead of orange, but same bike, and I'll always keep that bike. It's a true collectible bike. It's an icon from the day. It's a whole Ness rigid digger with a blown iron head, and it was a great era, and when I go and look through all these, when I walk in the showroom and I see the covers that I do have on the wall, it brings back so many memories, and I can relate it to times and places, and as you get older, you really appreciate that stuff a lot more. It's all, like I say, chopper history. So let's see. Yes, I will be at the Flying Pistons Builders Breakfast in Daytona. It's at Destination Daytona, and Jody and I will be there at the breakfast. Marilyn has reached out to us, and so I think it's Sunday morning, March 7th. So yes, Marilyn, we will be there at the Flying Pistons Builders Breakfast. It's a charity deal that Marilyn puts on, and I think it's for the Strider program, which we're very much involved in. The Strider program is little push bicycles for little kids that are learning how to ride a bike. It's a great program, and it goes into the school systems for like first and second graders, or it could even be for nursery school or kindergarten kids that have never had a chance to ride a bicycle. Kids aren't riding bicycles anymore. I mean, when we grew up, everybody was on a bicycle. Every kid that was on a bicycle pretended it was a motorcycle. So the Strider program is an awesome program. We're very much involved in it. We've put it into 3 or 4 different school systems already locally. And, we're always, doing charity events where we can make money to put into Strider programs in different area towns. If you, to donate to the program, you can email Jody at jody@perowitz.com, and she can give you the specifics. But we've had a lot of people that have been very generous and donated into the system, and it's a great system. It gets kids on bicycles, which is very important. Jody's going to post the link on this site, so you'll be able to go on that link and get the information you need to, if you want to donate to the Strider program. And like I say, we've put it into, I think, 4 school systems locally. And I do have to tell you, it was very difficult getting into the school system. A lot of the schools just didn't even, we had a hard time even replying to us. I mean, we're going to give them a $4,000 system for free. There's no hitches. They supply Strider supplies all the bicycles, the headgear, the instructions, the curriculum, everything, and they don't even reply to us. I mean, we've had to, request after request before they finally even reply. So, bicycles don't seem to be too important to a lot of people, but they're very important to us in the motorcycle industry, but just in general, to get kids out of the house riding bicycles. We support this very, very much. And if we want the younger crowd to continue being motorcyclists, this is a really good start, is the Strider program. And I got to say, Marilyn Stemp has been a huge, huge advocate of this whole thing. And we wouldn't even know about it if it wasn't for Marilyn. Our paint show, don't forget, our paint show is March 10th in Daytona. It's going to be a very cool deal. The registration is like 11 to 1, and the show is 1 to 4. We'll start giving the awards out at 4. We've got lots of really cool awards. Our awards are second to none. I don't think there's anyone that has a show that gives cooler, more prestigious awards than the Perowitz Paint Show. So if you want to have something different, and if you can win an award at our show, you're really stepping it up. Our Perowitz page, you can go on our Perowitz page, Perowitz Cycle Fab or DP Perowitz, D Perowitz, and you can see what we've got going on. And again, apparel, any apparel that any Perowitz apparel. We have the T-shirts and everything here. We don't have the sweatshirts here. You have to get them from Hot Leathers. You can go on hotleathers.com, and they have everything we need. They ship it out the same day, so there'll be no long time wait for the stuff. So that works out really well. And again, I want to thank our sponsors, Indian Motorcycles, Law Tigers, and NAMS, Badlands, and Electric Light. If you need electrical components, they're the people. They are excelling in the industry as far as the electric light stuff, the LED lights, and all the components, all the Badlands components and everything else. They're the guy. Jeff Zielinski is the guru of the electric industry, as far as I'm concerned. Law Tigers, any motorcycle-related accidents, contact Law Tigers, whatever state you're in, they handle it. And then Indian Motorcycles. If you want to step out and step up, try an Indian motorcycle. They've got new models. They get better and better every year. Jody has one that she absolutely loves. She put a lot of miles on it last year. She'll continue to put more on it this year. So I'm going to sign off today. It's been a great chop of history. I hope this put some insight into people as far as the magazine industry. And over the next short period of time, we're going to have more. I'm going to get more of the magazine guys on here to actually talk more about the history of their particular magazines. So we will see you on Thursday. I'm signing off. Chop of History. Thank you.